מזמור לדוד, אדוני לא יעשו, ונעשה שיעביצני, יאמנו כל שנאה עליני. נפשי שוי ביחד מנהג בצדק, למען שמו גם כי ילך. וגאי צלמו בסלוי בובו, כי אתו עמדי, שפטו משם תבואי מנחמוני, תאריך כבון השולחן בצוי. נשם דבר שמן ראשי כל סירי ביו, אחו וחסר ירדפוני כל ימי חיי. ישבתי בביס אדוני לאורך ימים. Now we're going to have Gitel's great grandson, Dovi, who will say Kapitel 2.
Ashriya Yeshua Loha Lach, Tzatz Ashriya Lugav, Taim Loha, Moshavet Simla Yashav, Kiev V'Tvaras Adonai Chavzo, V'Toraso Yegei Mangolayla, V'Hayak Eitz Shasul Al Chavinayim, Asher Perio Yitin B'Yito, V'Alehu Lo Yibol, V'Chol Asher Yasei Yatzliach, Oken Arashim Kiyim Kamot Asher Tikfenu Ruach, Alkem Ayakumur Ashim B'Mishpat V'Chatchan B'Adas Tzadikim, Kiyavei Adonai Derech Tzadikim, Derech Ashim Tolei.
Here to honor, eulogize Chaya Gitel, Bas Yehuda Arya, Chana. It's important to remember that the pain of the loss of a parent is quite significant. It makes no difference if it is a two-digit parent or a three-digit parent. It's a mother, a grandmother, a great-grandmother, yes, a mother-in-law. Also, it's significant, and at the right time, when it comes time to give comfort, we'll do our best. As Jews, we give comfort by meditating, thinking about what the other person is experiencing, thinking about someone you had your whole life from before you remember, and that person is no longer here physically. It is painful, and when you have the ability of feeling what the other person is going through, then you can give those words of comfort. So there's a time for it, not now. Now we are here to honor. And that will be done by a grandson, Avram, so Jason, you're like a grandson now, by law, and of course Paul, Pesach Foreman. You know, there's a statement that appears several times in the Gemara where great rabbis who merited a long life were asked, "Bameh he'arachta yomim?" In what merit did you live long? And the rabbis would respond and would share different attributes or practices they had in their life that in their mind were the reason for their longevity. One of them was Rabbi Elazar ben Shammah, who tells us the following. You want to know why I live long? Miyamai lo asisi kapandria lebeis hakneses. In other words, I never made a shul into a shortcut. You know, sometimes you have to get around the shul. Even us with Torah, you come by the back door, you want to get to the bulletin board. The short route would be through the Beis Medrash. It's not the way to do it, but rather you take that long route. La Sisi Kapandri La Beis HaMedrash, or Beis HaKnesses. So perhaps we could add to the simple understanding is that sometimes we view shul as a place we want to go in and get out, like a shortcut. You know, I have to get to work, but you know, I trained myself that for the first 35 minutes, or perhaps some days 30 minutes, I have to spend my day in shul. But it's like a shortcut. You want to get to somewhere else. But then there are those that approach tefillah and the relationship to the higher being as something that they want to have, not just they want to get out of. Tefillah. And the fact that Mrs. Fasten Gitel was able a week ago Tuesday, to be at the Vort for a great granddaughter, one that she davened for some time, that indeed she should merit to find her zivug, and she did, and the ability to meet 8 days ago the future great granddaughter's husband is a schus that came from tefillah. That's what she davened for. So we're going to hear her about the merit of a kesher, the connection she had with her grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The fact that she had a love for Eretz Yisrael and she had the incredible merit of being there this past Pesach. It was unofficial for her birthday, but at the time, due to the Ayin Hara element, we kept that quiet. But nevertheless, she was there, and indeed, quite incredible, an incredible journey. The word feisty is going to come up a lot here. It's going to come up a lot. Lively. There's humor, a lot of humor. She was indeed entertaining. There's no question about it. She was entertaining. And she would put people in place. I'm not looking at anyone specific, but she was incredible in it. And you couldn't walk away from her without a smile. Impossible. You're going to hear about that as well. And we shouldn't forget the schus of 7 years taking care of her husband. Was it 7 years ill? I mean, there's no question. There's a merit there. So I'll let the family members express this incredible moment, the ability to have 100 years, a lot to learn from. So we're going to start off with Avram. You're going to say a few words, after which Jesse's going to come afterwards, and then we'll hear from Paul.
So in her life, Bobby never wanted to burden anyone. Fiercely independent, she continued to live at home, continued to cook for herself and my mother. She drove, she refused to use a walker, she traveled to Miami for the winter, and she played cards with the same intensity and success that she did when she was much younger. Her passing was classic Bobby, quick, without fanfare, and without bothering anyone. She grew up in a relatively wealthy family in Poland, where her father afforded her an education not typical for girls at the time. Third youngest of 10, she succeeded in keeping pace with her older siblings. Her blonde hair and blue eyes served her well during the war, allowing her to shop and move about without being hassled too much. She and the bulk of her family escaped Europe and then rebuilt in America after the Holocaust. She was Sorry to get that from my grandfather. She was the last survivor of her siblings. Much of her tenacity and drive came from her father, who was a tough man and not easily impressed. He demanded that his children never be satisfied with their successes, irrespective of how much they accomplished. If that sounds familiar, then you know you're in the right funeral home, because Bobby adopted that personality in everything she did. Demanded the same from those around her. Bobby was never accused of having the softest exterior shell. She was short on words, blunt with her comments and opinions, and wasn't shy to let you know exactly what she was thinking. But those of you who really knew her can attest that her outside was a facade to what was really going on inside. She was a very loving and caring person, maybe not in the traditional way of giving hugs and being overtly complimentary, but in a more old-fashioned way. Behind her back, she would shep nachas for my mother, her grandchildren, and at times with my father. I can tell you that it was not easy all the time to accept that as a child, but as I got older, I realized that her true feelings and intent were the ones she rarely expressed to us directly. More than anything, it was her unique style that shaped our family and allowed each of us to become the best we could be. She always let us know that we could count on her and that she had our backs no matter what. She had zest for life, lived it fully, and enjoyed her and loved her family immensely. She had true emunah, davened daily with kavanah, said Tehillah with intensity and with tears in her eyes. She davened constantly that we should all do well in school, find good shidduchim, raise good kids, have good friends, and be successful. Lavi and Zaida Aleim Shalom were transferred to Siberia during the war, and later found passage through Czechoslovakia, France, and other countries before they were able to finally obtain visas to Canada. Like other refugees, they had to learn English from scratch and endure a new community that wasn't much more hospitable to Jews than it was back in the old country. Zaida lost his job weekly for failing to show up to work on Shabbos. Having a protected day off is a liberty we take for granted today. But in those days, it was a very difficult choice to make. But we set ourselves a goal to buy a house within the first few years of landing, believing that they could only plant roots if they had a home of their own. Despite plenty of naysayers, she put down a deposit on the house of her dreams and then convinced her brother Sruel that she would lose the deposit if he didn't help her with the balance. Bobby landed a job, she paid it back. Bobby landed a job as a sales lady behind the counter at Hermes Bakery and quickly moved up the ladder. Recognizing her talents, Mr. Myrovich tasked her with improving the sales and operations of his failing stores. After a number of months turning those locations around, she turned to him and said, "Mr. Myrovich, you think I'm only doing this to make you rich? You're going to give me one of these stores for free, or I'm walking out the door." And with that, Hermes Bakery on Shepherd became synonymous with Mrs. Fasten. For 30 years, Bobby, Zaida, and my mother worked 24/6 on building a solid business. We gave them parnasa, hope, and stability, and pounds of donuts and cake that I still carry with me today. Zaida started off his morning at 4:30 and prepared the shelves for the morning rush. Bobby showed up at 8, and my mother a few hours later. In the afternoon, my grandparents went to our home for a quick break and waited for us to get home. It was the highlight of their day. They fed us, sat us down so that we could do our homework. Then it was back to the bakery to relieve my mother, and they ended the day by going home together. The relationship with Bobby and my mother was unique to say the least. The two of them were joined at the hip, neither making a decision until Bobby said so. In her later years, Bobby begrudgingly allowed my mother to help her set up in Miami. But I'll never forget the call I received a few years ago, where Bobby practically begged me to get my mother to leave. Because in her words, "Your mother is slowing me down. It's 10 p.m. and I want to go downstairs and play cards. She wants to go to sleep." If Bobby was here now, she'd likely say something like, "Avram, sit down, you're talking too much," and she'd be right. She taught me that less is more, especially when it comes to talking, so let me finish with this. A week ago, my 100-year-old Bobby flew to New York to be at the first engagement of a grandchild. She walked in unassisted, worked the room like a pro, spent what seemed like 2 hours chatting with my Dobie, and Chef Nachas, the chassan was tall and shiny. She was loving, classy, and elegant, and that's the way I hope we all remember.
Treaty of Versailles, the Black Sox scandal, Babe Ruth being sold to the Yankees, were all major events that took place in the year 1919. What also occurred in 1919 was the birth of one of the most influential Canadians in history. No, I'm not referring to Pierre Trudeau, who was born on October 18th of that year, but rather to Gitel Fasten, also known as Bobby. Bobby was born in Erev Pesach, the third youngest of 10. She lived a content life with her family in Mulanoff until Nazi Germany invaded Poland. Because of her blonde hair and blue eyes and fearless nature, she was able to get away with walking through town, riding on trains, and picking up supplies for her family without getting caught. Then it was time to escape. She ran through Prague, Uzbekistan, and Russia in order to survive. Finally, together with Zaida, they made it to France and began to build their life anew. Soon after, Bobby and Zaida relocated to Canada. She gave birth to my mother-in-law to pride and joy. Bobby worked as a seamstress in the beginning, bringing peace to her home so she could take care of her family. Eventually, they grew the Hermes Bakery franchise on Shepherd. It became a family business where everyone loved to shop, get advice, and share their life stories. Many long-term friendships were born there. Everyone wanted to be around Bobby. At every Simcha gathering, people flocked to say hello to Mrs. Fasten, and she loved to be the life of the party. Bobby was a storyteller. She kept her audience captivated as she shared stories for many years in the most detailed and elaborated way. And of course, Bobby had advice for everyone, whether solicited or not. Our family looked forward to the many special times that we had together, especially Yom Tov in Toronto, winter vacation visits in Florida, and summer vacations in Wasaga Beach. The most memorable of all was celebrating Bobby's 100th birthday in Israel just last Pesach. Connections between the generations was made with game after game of cards and Rummy Cup. Beating Bobby was a true sign of success. Unless you were holding both jokers. Big deal. Anyone could win both jokers. Bobby was very independent. It was such a bracha that she was able to live in her home and drive around at her age. Not that I would want to be a passenger in the car at the age of 98 or 99, but every 2 years she was able to pass the driving test without even knowing what a yield sign was, but that was quite an accomplishment. I asked my children for some memories they have of Bobby. They fondly mentioned hanging out with her and playing games, and her special homemade foods, including delicacies like bubalas, borscht, gefilte fish, and galareta. She also shared chocolate with them, even though it was her favorite. We could always find Bobby with the Tehillim or Siddur in hand, as she spent much of her time davening. Bobby loved singing Zmiros and listening to Chazanas as well. Bobby lived to see her grandchildren get married and build families of their own. Just last week, she was able to fly to New Jersey, stay in her home, and participate in a vart celebrating her oldest great-grandchild, Ahuva's engagement. Having that one last visit will always be treasured in our memory. On behalf of Adina and the rest of my family, I'd like to ask you for Mechila, Bobby, for anything we said or did that might have hurt you in any way. We love you and we'll miss you.
One of the problems I was thinking second or third is everyone said everything already. Bear with me. This probably be talking to myself rather than to everyone else here. But I started asking myself a question. What's the purpose of a hesped? What's the purpose of a eulogy? Especially for someone who's lived 100 years. A person who survived pre-war Poland, survived the Holocaust, post-Holocaust, including Russia, the Depression in North America and in the entire world. Not only survived, but managed to bring up a family, still keeping of all the Jewish traditions and laws, a daughter, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, 4 generations. The kids are here now, with the exception of my son Aryu, who's in Israel. He was told by his doctor he can't leave. He got a blood clot in his leg and he can't travel. And he was most upset that he couldn't be here. My mother-in-law knew who she was, and she knew her strength. As Jason said, in pre-war Poland, she knew she could survive amongst a population that wanted nothing else but to kill the Jews. In Russia, she survived in abject poverty. No one wanted or was willing to help the Jews. But she survived. She was the last of a dynasty of 10 brothers and sisters. When she came to Canada through Paris and other countries, she and my father-in-law decided that they needed their own home. They weren't going to rent. And she did it with reckless abandon. She was going to have that house. She made a deal and moved forward. My mother-in-law rarely looked backwards. Done, what's next? She was a determined woman who understood what was important. Family was at the top of her list. She obviously took care of my father-in-law for 7 years in his latter, declining years of health. In her first job, she learned quickly. She took jobs she knew nothing about, but she did it well. There was nothing she believed she couldn't do, and there's nothing she wouldn't do. As they said, one of her first jobs was at Hermes Bakery. She was an outstanding salesperson. She was a proverbial salesperson who could sell a fridge to an Eskimo without electricity and get that person to come back and want more. Her favorite line at the bakery was, "Was noch? What else are you buying?" But she knew she couldn't make a long-term living as a salesperson, so she made a deal with Mr. Myrovich of Hermes. Either give me my own store or I'm out of here. And the rest is history. She worked long hours, no vacations, and she built a career. As you know, Annie, my mother-in-law, and my father-in-law worked tirelessly together as a family to build a fabulous business. Her priorities were clear. Kibbut Ava aim. Enough money to survive and take care of the family. Didn't need to show off. My in-laws did not need a big home. When they didn't have money, they just did what was necessary and they remained happy. She had values. Not values because other people were doing them or wanted them. She stuck to her guns because they were right for her. She also was ready to take risk. In a small story, about 15 years ago, I discovered a potentially high-risk investment which had a very strong upside. But I didn't want to take the same risk with her, so I didn't tell her about it until she found out. Boy, was she angry at me. Good enough for you, but not for me. She asked all kinds of questions. She wanted in. For years, what she did is she asked the questions. She trusted me, she trusted Annie, but we had to keep her up to date. And her intellect allowed her to stay up to date with us. She was prepared to delegate responsibilities, but she also kept her wits about her and made me keep her up to date. Always. At our Shabbos tables, we always had divrei Torah. Regularly, she challenged me on it. Regularly. I got frustrated one time and said, "You give it." She did. Probably better than I gave. She did it on the spot. There seemed to me a story that there's one of the meetings at Bikur Cholim, the speaker didn't show up. She did it. She got up and spoke and entertained a group. That was my mother-in-law. She didn't have any risks, any fear. She just did it. Her passion in the last couple of years was Rummy and Rummy Q. And even if she wasn't feeling well, you just had to say there was a game, and she was there. She and Andy went to Florida for 3 months. No problems. 3 years ago, we went to Israel on the Mizrahi Yom Yerushalayim program, and she set the tone for all the Toronto attendees. She even went jeeping. No problems. This past year, we went to Israel for Pesach. She was a trooper, and there were no problems. And last week, we got a phone call from Avram on Tisha B'Av that Ahuva was engaged, and she wasn't feeling well. Suddenly, a new life came to her. Wow! So Annie asked her, "You want to go to New York for Dad?" Of course. That was a week ago. What a turnaround. Her strongest hope over the past couple of years was to see Ahuva engaged, and with the announcement, my mother-in-law suddenly had a new lease on life, and she was a trooper. Family, being Jewish, working and making a living and being self-supporting were her priorities. Through all this, she had confidence in herself. She only worried about what was right to her, not what was right to everyone else. And you've heard this word before. She was feisty in her confidence. My mother-in-law drove until this past December, and it was really our choice to pull the license away. She was a chauffeur for her friend's carpool. Every Thursday, she picked them up, drove them to Fortino's for coffee, do some shopping, and drove them home. I don't know how many years this was going on. Her car was a bargain to the entire Jewish community. Where else can you buy a 25-year-old car which was only got 20,000 kilometers on it? She was getting older, but she was staying healthy. So at other funerals, I often hear the speaker talk about the doctors and thank them. Didn't go to doctors. She didn't like them. Stayed home. Told Annie to go to the doctor. She didn't have to go. But there are other things that keep a person alive. So our family can't thank Bikur Cholim enough. 1 or 2 times a week, she went to the program, she got dressed, she got excited about it. It was her way of getting out. The cottage was no longer my cottage, it was her cottage. She was the first to shul every Shabbos morning, always checking with me about the Bali Tefillin. I didn't have to write one. I got trouble, making sure that we had enough for Kiddush. She rarely ate at a Kiddush, but that doesn't mean that she couldn't ask me, did you do this, did you do that? And she sponsored them on a regular basis. These outings added to her life and gave her purpose. I started off, what's a hesped? What is a eulogy? Is it just to remember all the things? Of course it is. But I think you have to look at the values of the nifter. It is setting our sights on what is important and how to emulate those values and not getting caught up on less important things. She kept all of us honest and focused on real values. She was never afraid to tell me or anyone else when we had our priorities wrong. Mom, we will miss you in your ongoing direction.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Paul. Indeed, it was a COVID for Gitel. Before we say the Mola, I'd just like to mention, that when we address the pain of the loss of a parent, of a mother, a significant part of the pain is the inability to give, because you relate by giving. But in our tradition, there's something that lives on, it's called the neshama. And by doing good things, by being goisek b'tzarkei tzibur, your involvement in communal needs, in your practice of Torah mitzvahs, the study of Torah, those things benefit the neshama. And when you do them, you're giving, and that giving gives you comfort. So my blessing to you is that all of you, from the oldest to the youngest, continue doing good things. And remember that you are indeed giving to a very special neshama of Chaya Gitel, Bas Yehuda Arya, and her neshama should benefit from all those merits. Please rise for all. El Mole Rachamim, Sheichei Bamomim, Hamsem Nuchonachono, Al Kanfei Ashechino, B'ma'alos Kedoshim, U'Tahorim, Kezarak Yamazirim, Es Nishmas, Chai Gitel, Bas Yehuda Arya, Sholcho Loiloma, בעבור שאנחנו מספללים, בעד אסכולס נשמוסו, בגן עדן תמנוחוסו. לכן בעל הרחמים יסתר וססר כנפיו לא ילומים, מצרור בצורה חיימס נשמוסו, אדוני הוא נחלוסו. וסנוח בשלום על משכבו ונאמר אמן.
As the Master Aaron, Paul is ready to hit this. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to Bathurst Lawn Cemetery. This particular time, as we access this memorial, we'll make a right-hand turn. We're not going to go to Bathurst, we're going to go to Cactus, which is the first traffic light. We'll turn left, we'll come to the back side of the cemetery. Follow the procession all the way to the cemetery to the back. If your car is in the parking lot, please exit the 2 doors in front of you. Ladies, you can go this way, gentlemen, this way.